In a perfect world, our little conversation would go a little something like this. I would say, I'm reading a middle grade book, and you would say, oh, that's wonderful, I love middle grade, and I would say, well, I think some middle grades are really good and others I don't relate to quite so much, but yeah, I think they're wonderful. In a not so perfect world, our conversation might go a little something like this. I'm currently meeting a middle grade, I would say. And you would say, sorry? I'm currently reading a middle grade, I would repeat. And you would say, and you would give me a blank look. You might even scratch the bottom of your neck. Look at me again. If you're wearing sunglasses, you might tilt them down to the point of your nose, look down upon me, that is if you're taller than me, and say something along the lines of, sorry? What is that? And I would say, oh, that's okay. Middle grade is an age rating. What is that? You would say. And I would think, well, I'm getting there. Let me get to the point. But I would say to you, oh, so middle grade is an age rating for a book. So it kind of describes, but before I get any further, in a not so perfect world, you would turn around and say to me, oh, you read? And I would think, oh, this conversation is not for you. If you fall under that category of someone who says, oh, you read, this conversation may not be for you. But if you fall under that perfect world example where you say, I love middle grade, or I'm very much open to a discussion about middle grade, tell me everything, Mr. Francy, that you want to tell me about middle grade, then this video may very well be for you. Welcome or welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Yes, today we are going to be talking about middle grades. Yes, so for those of you who aren't aware, let me make it rather specific. In the world of reading, there are different types of age ratings. Age ratings are a statistic of a book that determines the target audience age that the book is being marketed towards. So if you have an adult book, it is a book that is marketed to adults. And I don't think that that's very hard to understand. Everyone in the English-speaking language knows what an adult is, so that's very easy. And then you have young adult. Well, that's very easy to understand too. It is a young adult, yeah. But depending upon where you are in the world, if someone were to say to you, I'm reading a middle grade, they may turn to you with a blank stare and say, what the bloomin' heck are you on about, Mr. Francy? What, in fact, is a middle grade? And I would say, oh, it's okay, I get that you don't understand. And they would say, oh, you do? And I would say, yes, I do. You're not American, so you don't understand the term middle grade. It's totally fine. Middle grade is a term that I've adopted over here in Australia. It is a term that's used in America to basically describe what we would call children. So middle grade books are books that are targeted to children. Now, yes, we could go on and have a lengthy discussion and say, well, there are picture books that are targeted to even younger children, but middle grades are books that are more like a novel style of a book, so chapter books, that are targeted to children, that won't feature a man jumping out from behind a screen trying to stab a woman to death, or a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman making sweet love in bed, or people swearing at each other, or some other acts of gross violence that occurs in a whole lot of adult fantasy that goes on. It is middle grade because it is a book directed to children, and while different middle grades feature different things, which is the topic we're going to discuss today, the point is that a middle grade book is a book that is a chapter book that is targeted to children. Now, children come in all different ranges, ages, sizes, mentalities, Thoughts, feelings, experiences, cultures, you name it, children are not a monolith. Neither are teenagers, neither are adults, but keeping the conversation to middle grade, children are not a monolith. And because of this, there are different types of middle grade books out there. Today, this is what I'm going to be discussing with you all because Mr. Francy has a little bit of a bee in his bonnet with certain middle grades, and with others, he absolutely loves. So, pick up a beverage, your favourite, whether it be a hot or a cold one, depending upon the type of season you're in right now. We're in summer over here in Australia, but dash it all, I have my hot chocolate on me because, you know, it's my hot chocolate, it's my cozy drink, and I'm in a bit of a cozy mood, so, you know, that's what I'm going to be drinking. You grab yours, maybe you want to grab a snack, or hey, maybe you're taking advantage of the fact that this is an audio version of a video and you want to be cleaning, or you're cooking, or whatever it is that you are doing. I hope that you are enjoying what you're doing, or that this video is helping you to be more productive, whatever it is. I hope you can relax. If you can't, I hope at the very least you can enjoy this video. Let's begin this discussion on middle grade versus middle grade. I'd like to open up this discussion by saying the exits are to the side and the rear, and you may exit at any time. For those of you who want the brief version of what I'm going into, allow me to explain it to you this way. There are two different types of middle grades in my view. They are middle grade books that are targeted to the more childish side of a child, and then there are middle grade books that are more targeted to the more mentally mature or potentially older side of the middle grade child. And I just wanted to dip my toe into discussing with all of you my thoughts and feelings on the differences between the two, and I'm going to do that in a much longer version than this. But if that is all you wanted to get out of this video, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. There are some cookies down the back. Feel free to grab some on your way out. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. But if you're sticking around, thank you for being here. Cookies down the back. Grab yourself some and sit back down because it's time to continue on. Okay, so the very first middle grade that I can remember picking up was Harry Potter and the, I'm sorry, I'm Australian, Philosopher's Stone. You may know this book in America to be called as Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, this is a debate that has gone on ever since the first person who had Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone met the first person who had Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. They had a conversation and said, why do we have two different titles here when they're both written in English? And it's gone on since then. No one seems to understand why there are two different titles. Trust me, this is not the point of my video, but I'm going to very quickly and succinctly give you my view on this and what I have learnt. Okay, so J.K. Rowling is English, she's an English author. I'm not going to talk about her, I'm just talking about the book itself. She decided to write a book about an English boy named Harry Potter who ends up finding out he's a wizard and going to a magical school, and she called it Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The book did so well that it was released worldwide. The problem with it being released in America, from the research that I've done, is that American publishers thought, and it must be noted that many readers disagree with this, but American publishers thought that Americans would have a tough time knowing what a philosopher even is, so the word had to be changed to sorcerer, so that it would be easier for an American middle grader to read. What I don't understand about that, quite frankly, very quickly, gonna keep this brief, is a philosopher and a sorcerer are two completely different things, so I don't understand that. I mean, I understand the title's too long anyway, but why don't you just call it like Harry Potter and the Thinker's Stone? Right, someone who thinks a lot, because a philosopher is someone who philosophizes, who thinks constantly about different things, who has different philosophies and ways of thinking. A sorcerer is someone who is magical and who has magic at their disposal, and they use that sorcery in whatever way that they see fit. It is two completely different things. But also I found out that that the American book, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, has Americanisms in there. So while in the UK edition, which is what I have and what we have readily available here in Australia, may say the word rubbish bin, for the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, you would find Harry Potter taking out his garbage into and putting it into the trash can. And look, it's fine. It is what it is. Far be it from me, a book purist, to want to turn around and say, but that is not canon because Harry Potter was putting it into a rubbish bin and not a trash can. But anyway, it is what it is, and we will let that go. If you want to talk more about this, let me know in the comments below, because I could talk a lot more about this. It has done my head in for the longest time, especially because readers in America, when they find out the reason for the title change, every single one has come back to me and said, we know what a philosopher is. I don't get it. Right? I don't get it either. What were those publishers thinking? But we'll move on. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was the very first middle grade book that I picked up. Maybe this book spoiled me too much. And maybe that was the reason why my expectations were way too high. This book is so fantastic for a middle grade. It is a fantasy book. As I said, we follow this boy whose name is Harry Potter, whose parents have died when he was a baby. He is adopted. Well, yeah, he's adopted, even though they don't really care about him, by his really horrible aunt and uncle, who take him in, and Harry is treated like a slave. He then finds out he is a wizard, and there's more to him than meets the eye, and he goes to a school, and things happen. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this book kept me on the edge of my seat as a child. I had read other books and I really don't remember a lot of the other books that I picked up, which is a big part of my point. There's middle grade and middle grade. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, even if I hadn't read it, the many more times I've read subsequent to the first time I read it would have always stuck with me because of just how great a book it is. The plot is fantastic. The magic system is wonderful. The world building is absolutely amazing. The amount of thought and attention to detail that J.K. Rowling put into this first book, not only the book itself on its own, but foreshadowing what would be to come for the remaining books, is just so fantastic that I literally felt like I was there, walking alongside the characters, looking, seeing, hearing, smelling the sights, sounds, smells, atmosphere of this world. It was so fantastic. So for me, my expectation level was at that point. This is what a middle grade is. It is a fantastic book that is marketed to children, that doesn't in any way talk down to children, or, you know, I don't really want to use these words, but so to speak, dumb things down for the sake of it's a child that's reading the book. If the child doesn't understand the book, or if a child can't read for whatever reason, hopefully a parent has time to read it to them. And if the child doesn't know what the word is, then the parent can explain it to them. For me, if I didn't know what a word was, well, back in my day when we really didn't have computers up and running, I would be using a good old thing called a dictionary to find out what the word meant. I mean, that's just me. But anyway, my point is, it was so fantastic, it set the bar really high. Now, the first middle grade book that I read on record on my Goodreads, which, to be fair, only started documenting my reading from the 9th of January onwards, I actually read on the, beginning on the 10th of January, which was a book called Once by Morris Gleitzman. This book, okay. Yeah, it's hard to say. I feel like if there is a scale of middle grade books, then there is the young side of middle grade, the middle side of middle grade, and the older side of middle grade. And this was more the middle side of middle grade. We deal with a child. It's a middle grade historical fiction, which to me doesn't make sense that such a thing would exist, a middle grade historical fiction. But anyway, this book is set during the German War, around that timepiece. I'm not a history buff. It is what it is. And we follow this boy who has been taken to an orphanage for some reason. I don't remember why. I just remember that a lot of books were burned, which, I mean, that's just... I don't like dog-earing books. That's just a personal thing I don't like. But if you want to dog-ear a million books, provided you don't burn them, I have no problem with that. You burn a book, I get a little bit upset. But anyway... the book would mention things which really showed me that it was a middle grade book. One example being that this boy was walking past let's just call it a forest for the sake of just giving it a name. He wasn't going in the forest, he was just walking by the forest, let's say that. And he was hearing these sounds in the distance that sounded like fireworks, where if you're an adult reading this book, it is very clear to you that it's not fireworks, it is gunshots, because they're in the midst of the war and people are being killed. It was a hard book for me to read because, well, for many reasons, but one of them being that it was dumbed down to say that it was fireworks as opposed to being gunshots, where if you're an adult or if you're a well-read reader or whatever, even children, I give credit to many children out there who would have picked up on this too, would have known it's gunshots. So it's hard for me to read something like that and then think, why aren't we calling it gunshots? But also at the same time, oh my gosh, this poor child thinks that something is going on, a celebration that he can't be a part of, and yet what's going on is people are dying around him. So it was hard for me to read emotionally, but it was also hard for me to read because it just felt like it was being dumbed down. And I'm sorry, people are going to disagree or agree, and that's fine. You sound off in the comments below and tell me what you think, but I struggle to read middle grade books that dumb down the terminology or the experiences, the plot or whatever it is, the character interactions, because they think that a child can't handle something, whether it be something such as a theme or something more specific such as a certain word or something like that. It just really annoys me. So how about you? Let me know. I call these types of books that I feel too old for. Now, you may come back to me, and in a very imperfect world, you would come back to me with a smart remark along the lines of, but Mr. Francy, you're not a child, so how can you say that it's a bad thing that you feel too old for a middle grade? And my answer is this. I have read many, I can't say it enough, many middle grade books that I don't feel too old for. And that is where my problem comes in. Many authors have successfully released middle grade books, whether they are standalones or series, that have gone on to be really successful, that don't dumb the book down for the sake of, oh my goodness, this is a child, and so we need to take every consideration to the umpteenth degree for this little kid. And so that's what I'm saying. If these authors don't do that, if these successful authors are saying, look, we know that there's a line we can't cross when it comes to themes, certain things that might be said, like swearing, for example, if we want to use terminology, or themes that may come up, like we can't discuss sex, we can't discuss violence, and whatever, that's fine, but we still make it an entertaining book. To me, I don't understand how these ones that are really dumbed down for children do as well as they do. It just doesn't make sense to me. Are these children just not exposed to good books? And then that, of course, brings about a whole other argument that I don't want to go into because we don't have enough time. But to put it purely and simply, that argument being, I find it extremely tough. One of the toughest things for me to handle is when children are assigned books to read in school that are not the best book for this child. The child doesn't like the book in this scenario, and therefore the child equates that with, all books are horrible, reading is not for me. That is just something that I really struggle with. I understand that children need to read when they're younger, and I think that there are many benefits, and yes, I'm biased, I love to read myself, but I think that the curriculum should be changed for children in primary school, middle school, whatever you call it, elementary school, I think is the word in America, whatever you call it in where you live, the curriculum should be changed in a way that has the teachers saying to the students, you pick out the book you want to read and show me, and I will tell you if that fits the prompts that we need to go off of in order to mark you. Rather than just saying, here you go, here's a book about like once, here's a book that's set in the past, which not a lot of children are going to really care much about the past. I don't want to make a judgment. I'm not saying every child, but a lot of children probably don't care about the past or the war or anything like that. They're young children. They haven't lived in that time. They probably aren't thinking about that. They're probably not thinking this is entertaining. Why would you give that to them? Where if you allow them the freedom to choose their own book, and it at least falls within the confines of what you need to mark anyway, then what the heck is the issue? What's the problem with doing that? The child will be more likely to love the book, be more passionate about what you've assigned them to do in the first place, and also go on to continue to love reading. Am I right or wrong? You let me know. But anyway, I'm now going to continue on and discuss some other middle grade books that I've read, some that I've loved and why I've loved them in comparison to some other middle grades that I haven't loved and why I haven't loved them. Okay, I'm going to quickly compare two different Goosebumps books. The first one I'm going to compare is book number 26, Goosebumps My Hairiest Adventure, versus book number 1, Welcome to Dead House, both by R.L. Stine. The very first Goosebumps book that I picked up according to Goodreads, so starting, as I said, from early on in 2020, I picked this book up in March of 2020, in fact, was My Hairiest Adventure. This book, if I ever did a video of worst books of all time, this book guaranteed is on that list. This book was not only bad, in my opinion, it was infuriating, and I'll tell you why. The book was so extremely boring. We open up with this, we're following the perspective of this boy whose name is Larry, or Larry, I think if you're American, because something comes up to do with him being hairy towards the end of the book, so I think it's meant to be Larry, but in Australia we would pronounce it as Larry. So we're following Larry, and he is in elementary school. He has an elementary school band that he's a part of. They're going to perform at the end of the book, so we open up at the beginning of the book with them doing a rehearsal. And while they're on a break from rehearsal, they find this bottle of Insta-Tan tanning lotion, and they decide to put it on themselves so that they can have a nice glow for by the time they get to the performance. But things ends up happening, and I'll just say this, Harry ends up growing hair all over himself and starts freaking out a bit about this. This did not freak me out. I went into this book as my first horror that I read beginning in 2020 and just thought, okay, this is not horrific at all. What's horrific about hair growing? Maybe to a child it is. I don't know. I felt too old for it. Then, at the end of the book, we get an explanation as to why this is happening. The explanation was so good. The explanation lasted about a page, and that is it. And then the book ended. So not only was it boring until the reveal happened, and then the next two words were the end. There was no aftermath. Why? It's so annoying. Then again, Goosebumps Welcome to Dead House, book number 1, fantastic book. Do not remember the characters' names, but we follow this girl and boy. We're following the perspective of the girl, their brother and sister. They move into this house that their uncle has bequeathed them, and this house and the surrounding areas is very scary, haunted, all that sort of thing. So many different things occur in the book that kind of kept me on the edge of my seat as I went along, and I just really found it so fascinating. Around every corner, something else is going on, where in My Hairiest Adventure, it was just so boring. And then that infuriating ending. One thing I don't understand really about this is that they're both written by the same author. Not only are they both middle grades, they're both written by the same author, and one is extremely boring and the other is extremely entertaining. And now let's talk about Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero. So this was my very first tome that I read that was a middle grade book. I did not know at that time that you could have a middle grade tome. Now, what is a tome, you may ask? A tome is a book that is 500 pages plus. So once it hits that 500 page mark, it is called a tome. 250 pages being a half tome, and you can go up and down from there. 1000 pages is a double tome, so on and so forth. So this was the first time I had read a middle grade book that was a tome. I was so surprised that there was a middle grade book out there that was a tome, because middle grade is targeted to children. How can children enjoy a book that is 500 pages? The standard, not everyone is the same. So I'm just saying the standard attention span of a child is not so vast that it will last a 500 page book. So I was extremely surprised at the length, but in saying that, it was so intriguing. We follow this boy, and I cannot for the life of me remember his name. I think it is Jason, I think. But anyway, we follow this boy who is a demigod. He is mother was human, his father was a god, and so he's like a half-blood god, if that makes sense, so called a demigod. And we explore so many different things. He goes on a quest. We deal with all of these different mythological beings, and it just kept me fascinated from, what was that page? I remember my review. It was a long time ago, saying something like, I really wasn't enjoying it up to page 25, for example. Page 25. And then page 25 hit, and I loved it from there all the way through to the end, because it was a slow beginning, a really slow beginning. But once it began, there's a first moment that we have, I won't say what it is, but there's a first moment that we have in this book where the fantasy side comes into play, and from then on, I was captivated by this book, and I hadn't even heard of the Percy Jackson series. I found this book randomly. I was working at a thrift store at the time voluntarily, and we had that book there at the store, and it just looked really like it was up my alley. So I purchased the book and started reading it, and yeah, this was so good. It wasn't dumbed down at all. Our protagonist, I'm trying to remember. No, in the Percy Jackson world, the protagonist has dyslexia. Again, making the point that this is by Rick Riordan, by the way. And so discussing something as complex as dyslexia to a child, I think is fantastic. And then you have other books where you're just dumbing things down. Why? Well, it doesn't make sense to me. Okay, now let's talk about Rowan of Rin by Emily Rodda. Okay. My mother purchased this book for me when I was a child, because she knew I loved reading, and we did not come from a wealthy family financially. My mother used to say, we may not be wealthy in money, but we are very rich in love, and we were. But my mother made a deal with me because she knew how much I loved reading, which was, I'll buy you a book. As soon as you've finished reading it, I'll buy you the next one. I struggled with this one. I DNF'd, not knowing what DNFing meant back then, this book probably about 10 times. And then ended up just borrowing books from the library because it was just so hard for me to get through. Not because of the language or the writing style, but because it was so boring. And I realized it was because, again, a lot of things were dumbed down. And I didn't like that. A lot of other books that my mother had purchased for me weren't dumbed down. So I grew up with a higher expectation of books. So with this one comparatively, it just didn't work for me. I eventually re-picked this up. I picked it up in July of 2020, and I got through the beginning. I pushed myself because I wanted to make sure I read the whole book, and it ended up being okay in the end. In the end, I gave it 3 stars. But the beginning was just dumbed down so much that it annoyed me. Once again, let's make a comparison with the same author. Recently, I read the Del Toro Quest series, the first series, because there are 3 series in this series, apparently. And yes, I don't mean 3 books in the series, I mean 3 series in this series. So series 1, series 2, and series 3 in the Del Toro Quest series. But anyway, and it's by the same author, Emily Rodda, and it was fantastic. So again, I don't get it. Like, one is dumbing things down, and the other one is just so incredibly fascinating. I just don't get it. But one must pause here to make a point that a book does not need to be long or even have very many words for it to be an amazingly impactful book for a child or even an adult. And so, of course, I must mention this book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. This is amazing. I recommended it many times. I'm going to stop doing that now because I've said it too many times. You just have to read the book. Trust me, you won't regret it. Trust me, trust me, trust me, you will not regret it. It does not have many words, but every single sentence is extremely impactful in this book. Shout out to the Nevermore series. The Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. The first 3 books are out. They are so good. If you are looking for something after reading Harry Potter and you haven't found anything yet, this is where you go. It took me forever to find this, but this is where you go. The Nevermore series. It is so well done. A partial shout out to the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. I loved book number 1. Like, seriously, Keeper of the Lost Cities was so good. This is by Shannon Messenger. So fascinating. Book number 2, I didn't like. Book number 3, I really didn't like, and I didn't continue on with the series, but I loved book number 1. I recommend that. The world building of book number 1 is so good. And then suddenly I felt like Shannon Messenger started restricting herself with her world building in book 2 and 3. Let me know if you agree. Negative shout out to Me, My Dad, and the End of the Rainbow by Benjamin Dean. This, just let me down. It was meant to be a book about a boy finding out about his gay father, and I ordered this book on express delivery because I thought what a great idea for middle grade. It didn't do enough. I mean, it barely scratched the surface, so it let me down. I'm looking for a middle grade author to go there. Don't cross the line. But if you're going to have a discussion between a child and an adult that is gay and explaining that to their child, actually have the discussion. Don't skim the surface. And I'll end this with the recommendation of Mr. Lemoncello's Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library by Chris Grabenstein. Book number 1, the Mr. Lemoncello Library series. It is fantastic, and not recommend furthermore by Tahara Murphy because that one is on the younger side of middle grade as well. Okay, what are your thoughts and feelings on middle grade? We've already made it to the half-hour mark, so I have to end here. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but I feel like there is so much more to unpack that we've barely begun to scrape the surface. So continue on the conversation in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on younger middle grade books versus the older middle grade books? Do you feel like we're dumbing books down for the sake of children that we should or shouldn't have to do? Let me know all of your thoughts. But in the meantime, these are just my thoughts. I should have said that disclaimer at the start. They are my thoughts alone. If you agree with me or disagree with me, it's totally fine. I just wanted to get them out there. Sometimes middle grade books can be extremely fascinating, and sometimes I find them extremely dull. Sometimes I find that my age suits it, even though I'm an adult and I'm reading a middle grade. And sometimes I feel like I'm way too old for a middle grade. So what are your thoughts? Let me know. But in the meantime, once again, that is where I am going to leave it. Letting you all go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do be kind and love one another and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And until next time, you know what I'm going to say. Say it with me. Happy reading. Bye, everyone.